The Center for Procurement Excellence is a nonprofit member organization with a mission of educating, promoting, and advocating for better RFP processes. Join CPE today and make your RFPs faster and more transparent. Membership also includes discounts to all of our training and networking events. CPE hosts a variety of virtual and in-person networking and training events throughout the year. Visit our website to get signed up. CPE Speakers Bureau is available for your regional and national meetings and professional conferences. Contact us to learn more.
Welcome to Ask the RFP Doctor, CPE's monthly web series where we discuss the latest best practices in procurement and supply chain management.
So we're going to talk about RFP soft skills. Let's dive in. The big picture with this, as a little bit of foundation setting, is that in procurement, we spend a lot of time focusing on the processes, the procedures, the templates, and the language. But the other reality that we have to acknowledge is that there's a lot of time that we spend interacting with other people. And so the people skills of the business are supremely important, right? And that's, we interact with external vendors at multiple stages of the process, internal leadership, budget holders, end users, external viewers, the taxpayer, sometimes even news agencies, our internal user groups and business units, and the list goes on. What we're going to focus on here today when it comes to soft skills is working with internal user groups. So that's what we're going to focus on here today. In terms of what that means, so different groups use different terms, but your internal team, your user group, your business units could include your end users, your internal clients or client personnel, and so on. Basically, what we mean by this is all the non-procurement members of your organization's project team. Basically, the project team itself, who are non-procurement experts that you're helping to support and lead through the procurement process. Some of the impacts that we can encounter when working with those internal client personnel for our user groups is a few things. So these first three is that sometimes you'll see those internal clients who have never been involved in a procurement process before, or they have very limited experience with it, or limited experience with this type of project or service that you're going out to procure. So they may not know exactly what they want. It might be their first time in a while doing something like this. Now, from a procurement soft skills point of view, we can provide some education, training, some toolkits, and we can really help those folks to overcome these three impacts that can slow down a procurement process. There are other things that we'll commonly encounter as well. Is you'll see those internal client groups who already think they know who the right supplier is, so they want to sole source them, they want to pick them, they've worked with them before, all that type of stuff. And sometimes we can look at these as being more like resistive behaviors. And this will require some greater attention in how we handle things from a procurement point of view. To address that a little bit more fully, from a resistance point of view, one thing to keep in mind is that most people are not intentionally trying to be difficult or slow down or obstruct the procurement process. Usually there's some type of fear of change or fear about the outcome, or just a lack of understanding. And this is something that we've tracked across Simplar's organizational change database, which we could talk about more separately. But the basic thing that we've tracked here is that the number one cause or type of resistance to a new process or a new change when you have an inexperienced client group is that they will revert to what they already know, or they'll revert back to what they've seen in the past. And so that's not something that's open argument or things like that. It's more of just reverting back to what they've seen before. And the other thing to point out is that more than a third of all resistance types are totally inadvertent. So they're not intentional or trying to obstruct things. It's a good foundation to keep this in mind when it comes to the types of resistance that you could encounter. So some things to ask ourselves. When we're working with our internal client teams, are they doing things like this? So for example, wanting to sole source or pick a supplier or circumvent some aspect of the typical RFP process. Are they doing this because they are trying to cause a protest? Probably not. Are they doing it because they want to make our lives as procurement professionals more difficult, make it a more challenging process for us? No, probably not. Could it be because they think that they don't have time? Yes, we know how often we're crunched for time. Could it be because they've had a bad experience before? They don't want to get stuck with the wrong supplier. Could be that fear. Could it be that that team has personally invested a lot of time trying to gather information about products or suppliers and they want to see that used in a particular way. They might already think they know what's best. And you might think that some of the things that they've gathered are not really necessary for the RFP, but this all factors into that personal side of facilitating the RFP process. So in other words, there are some reasons that are somewhat valid, right? There are some real valid concerns that our internal client teams have that can lead to these types of impacts to our RFPs. So the question is, well, how do we as the purchasing agent or the procurement agent help navigate these things? That's where our true value to the organization really can shine. So how can we help is the big question. We're going to tackle this as 4 wisdoms here from the wise Gandalf the Grey. So number 1, let's understand potential perceptions of our internal client teams. So we'll talk about that. Number 2, really truly listen to what our client teams are saying, because they are the internal customers to us in procurement from a certain point of view. Number 3, we'll emphasize the importance of the project outcome to them. We'll talk about that and act as a facilitator. So quickly, wisdom number 1. Understanding the potential perceptions that our internal client teams may bring to an RFP process. So research has shown that about 40% of internal client teams will view the procurement process as being helpful to them, whereas the majority will view procurement as either being not helpful or even an outright obstacle that might be slowing them down. So you have to keep in mind that these perceptions come into play. And this is like the starting point for some client teams. They think that we're just going through a bureaucratic process. It's going to slow them down. They may have had poor procurement experiences in the past. They don't really understand how procurement will be of value to them. And so that's some of the foundational piece that's going to lead to questions, possibly need us to smooth things over and recognize that this is the baggage that's being brought to the RFP process oftentimes. Wisdom number 2, listen to what they are saying. So in other words, let those internal client teams share their thoughts, their concerns, let them share more about their projects, not because we need to become the technical subject matter expert for their projects, but because we want to draw these things out of them. So the downside of this is, of course, that it takes time to have these discussions with our project teams. But the upside is that we're going to learn more fully what their needs are, what their project is about, what the inner workings of their business group really is, which is a huge benefit to us professionally as procurement agents. And the other thing is sometimes we see procurement agents who don't want to get into all of these discussions because it kind of is like a fish out of water experience. We start talking about the project and the requirements and the business needs, and it can veer outside of the typical purview of a procurement agent, which is the RFP process itself. And that's okay. So don't be afraid of getting a question that you're not 100% confident how to answer it. It is completely okay as these conversations happen to say, look, that's a great question. Let me check with my team. Let's see how we can build it into the procurement process. I'll get back to you soon. It's totally okay to have that type of a mentality. Number 3, emphasizing the importance of the project outcome. So we will all know some of those hot button issues in the RFP that can lead to discussions and challenging discussions, let's say, with our internal project team. So what evaluation criteria to use, giving them feedback on their statement of work, where you see gaps, where you see things that may not play well into an RFP process. The point of all this is that as procurement agents, we can somewhat play the role of a fortune teller with decent accuracy, right? Which is, we know things such as if there's a poor statement of work, it's vague or it has gaps, well, that's going to probably lead to higher than desired pricing because more contingencies are going to get built in. It could lead to lower competition as folks do not choose to propose if the statement of work is too vague. You'll know things such as, when the client group says, oh, I don't really know how I want to look at price, or I don't really know what type of product demonstration I want to do. Let's just let the vendors propose what they think is best, right? Those types of conversations. And you'll know how to respond to that with, well, if we just leave it completely open, it's very likely that you're going to have pricing formats that are all over the place, really difficult to digest. It's not going to be apples to apples when we get there to compare them. Or, hey, if we leave the demonstration process totally open to the vendors and don't provide some structure, then it's likely we're going to walk out of those demos not having seen everything that we really need to see to make a good, effective evaluation judgment. And so, in other words, you're looking at all of these types of things that become those discussions with our internal client groups and saying, hey, if we don't address this now, here's the likely outcomes. You're somewhat predicting that future. and helping folks see what the impact is truly going to be. So in other words, be ready for those types of moments and those conversations, and respond with predictions of what that potential outcome or impact would be to the RFP process or to the project outcome down the line. And usually that will tend to help things. Then when it comes to acting as a facilitator, so it's our job in procurement to guide, to assist these business partners and internal client teams. So it's our job to set the path for them. So some things that we want to remember and things that we can do. For them, as a business partner or internal client team, procurement process might be all of these things. And so we can help familiarize them, walk them through it, help them get their bearings. Sometimes they're just purely disoriented with what's to come. And so one recommendation we would have is a simple, usually 60-minute initial onboarding meeting, I call it, or a step-by-step walkthrough of the procurement process. So do that right up front for your major RFPs or almost all of your RFPs and RFQs. Get that project team together, meet them, see all the faces, walk them through what the typical RFP process is, get some of the foundational elements ironed out, ask them questions about the schedule, the budget, the timeline, major milestones, requirements, things of that nature, concerns that they have. And that's usually a great place to start. Now, the challenge with this is that this is a time investment. So we are saying, yes, take that hour, set up that extra meeting, meet with that project team, and that takes time. We know everyone's super busy. However, the way to think about this as is more of an investment. So, and it's an investment that if you can avoid even a single change to the RFP process later, like a single schedule change or a delay that happens in the middle of an RFP process, by taking this hour, usually that's like 1,000% ROI, because when things are changing midstream, it's stressful, it adds more time, and it's certainly going to take more than this hour to fix it and respond to all the vendors, keep everyone up to date. So usually what we have found is that taking the time to do this upfront really is an investment that will pay off dividends later on. Maybe this could be a future teaching moment of how to run an effective onboarding meeting, provide some tools and thinking about that as well. So that's the way to think about it. Also, in terms of acting as a facilitator, is this. We don't just want to tell our business units no, or we can't do that, even if they're truly asking for something that cannot be done, because that will happen. We'll get requests that we know we can't do it from a public procurement perspective. But what we're going to try to do is not just say no. We're going to try to respond in ways that say, look, here's some alternative suggestions. Here's some other ways that can meet their objectives, and of course also meet procurement policies and needs. But the basic idea is that we're going to be a problem solver in those moments, try to get back to the underlying concern of that business unit and find different ways to address it, because you've probably seen way more options than they have and how to address that concern in an RFP process. So that's a quick highlight on working with our internal business units and client teams. The summary is that team leadership really is what separates a great procurement professional from the rest, is we really are leading that project team through the RFP process. You will encounter behavior that seems to be resistive to a certain extent. It's actually fairly common, but it's usually not because of some major adversarial reason or concern. It's usually due to things as simple as lack of experience, or being busy and not having enough time, or just not sensing the value of what the RFP process will do for our internal client teams. And so our job is to navigate these realities. It makes us an even more important asset to our organization. So there's that. Now, on the topic of soft skills, we want to bring to your attention an opportunity, a research opportunity. So we are looking for some volunteers. What this is, so our friends at Simplar are doing a research study looking at what are called the human dimensions of procurement professionals. So their human dimensions assessment has 3 different dimensions. It's a personality inventory. If you're not familiar with Hexaco, it's based on the big 5 personality factors. It's expanded to the big 6, as you can see here. So it's 6 major scales with 4 subscales each. So it's a personality measure. If you take the assessment, you'd get your results for this. You'd also get a behavioral assessment. Many of you may have heard of DISC. And then thirdly, an emotional intelligence appraisal as well. So we're doing this human dimensions assessment. We're looking for as many procurement professionals to participate as possible. And if you take the assessment, what you'll get is a free report of your personalized scores for all of those measures that we just covered. And then in addition to your personal scores, we'll also include comparisons with other procurement professionals, not by name, but more like what the average is across the whole profession, if that makes sense. So see kind of how you stack up with the general procurement professional from a personality, behavior, and emotional intelligence standpoints. The assessment itself takes, I think, about 30 or 40 minutes to get through. It's a decent amount of questions, but it does provide you with a lot of information, and we'll send you a full report of your scores once we get enough participants to give you your score, but also some comparisons to others across the country. US and Canada typically is what we see, but others from other locations are welcome to participate as well. So if you'd like to get involved with this, it's just an open opportunity, totally free to get your report. That's the exchange for taking the time to participate in the study. Shoot me an email. Happy to get you involved. We'll provide you with a personalized link so you can go in and fill out the questionnaire, get your scores back, and we move on from there.
This has been Ask the RFP Doctor, brought to you by the Center for Procurement Excellence.